Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing marvellously well and that you're enjoying the fabulous weather that we've been having of late. Of course, you might be living in a part of the world where the weather isn't that great, but we're experiencing a soon-to-be change of season, of course, and so I hope you're enjoying every minute of it. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, it was a prepossessing summer's day in our brownstone apartment in Tribeca, where I thoroughly enjoyed living in the lap of luxury, thanks to the first budding fruits of my husband Titan's successful writing career, where the advances he received for his books had certainly improved our standard of living in exponential ways that I had never imagined possible. In truth, I was now living the city life I had always dreamed of, that I believed for a long time was beyond my reach, until one day, as if by magic, it no longer was. I do recall vividly as a little girl walking down a pretty tree-lined street in Tribeca, where the honey locust trees grew on both sides of the long ribbon of heavily shaded grey asphalt, like tall lofty lollipops, covered with whispers of pretty green foliage. At the time, my innocent eyes stared in awe at the long, magnificent line of brownstone apartments, with their fancy ornate architecture, along with their tall, narrow windows. I tried to imagine how the other half lived. Me and my sister Sammy had been in our school uniforms at the time. We watched an extremely well-dressed young couple that both looked like movie stars that had stepped out onto the red carpet together, leaving their brownstone apartment and getting into a bright red sports car with an extremely sexy sunroof that made me literally drool with envy. I could only dream of owning a car like that. The woman reminded me of Jackie Kennedy, whom I'd seen in old photographs. She had an understated yet natural elegance about her. She was wearing a Hermes scarf over her dark hair, along with a pair of glamorous oversized dark glasses that framed her eyes, making her look extremely sophisticated, while the handsome young man looked rather like Hugh Grant in his younger days. He was dressed in casual, smart clothes. The debonair couple climbed into the gorgeous red sports car together, the young man not forgetting his chivalry for a moment as he rushed over to the woman's side to open the passenger side door for her. The Jackie Kennedy look-alike, on noticing two schoolgirls gawking at her, cast us a regal wave as if she was the queen herself. Her lips were painted with a bright red lip gloss. She smiled warmly at us, and then the couple, whom I never saw again, drove off into the sunset and were gone from our sight. I was rather disappointed to see them leave, for a touch of glamour had peppered my life for just a brief moment in time, and I wanted to hold on to it, rather like a child never letting go of a party balloon. For a second I stood there in my school uniform, staring in bewilderment at the scene that had unfolded before my eyes, like a glamorous snapshot from a Hollywood movie. I was flooded with a rather strange feeling of déjà vu, as if I'd been on this street before at another time in my short life, which wasn't even a remote, plausible possibility. Me and my sister Sammy had never visited the Tribeca neighbourhood before a day in our lives. My mother talked about the plush, well-to-do neighbourhood often enough, rather dreamily, proclaiming that in an ideal world she'd seriously love to own a brownstone apartment in Tribeca. The joke was the apartment me and my sister Sammy had been staring at that day, from where the young, memorable couple had emerged, where they trotted down the rather grandiose wrought-iron staircase that led to the street, where the red car was awaiting them like a private chariot, was exactly the same apartment me and my husband Titan had purchased for ourselves not so long ago. I know it was exactly the same apartment, as the honey locust tree directly opposite the brownstone apartment was the most distinctive tree I'd ever seen. It was rather lopsided, and bent over at a peculiar angle, rather like a hunchback old man, stooped across the road, looking for the coin that had fallen out of his pocket. Why I had chosen to make a mental note of that particular honey locust tree as a little girl, I do not know. but let's just say I never forgot it. My sister Sammy and I had looked longingly at the apartments in this plush, affluent, upwardly mobile neighbourhood, wondering what it was like to live in such a grandiose apartment. I imagined myself looking like Jackie Kennedy and taking a ride in a red sports car with a sunroof. Surely that woman must have felt like a princess, I thought, riding into the afternoon with a prince at her side that would carry her away to an ivory castle. I so often thought of that scene growing up. "Imagine being so rich you could afford to live in an apartment like that," my sister had said longingly, after the couple had finally left the area. "I wouldn't mind the flashy red sports car as an added accessory," she joked. "Boy, I did like that car. And that woman, she was so nice, don't you think? She smiled at us and waved. She looked as if she'd stepped out of a bandbox. She was pretty, even though we didn't get to see her eyes close up, because she was wearing such large sunglasses. But I bet her eyes are very pretty." I nodded. "She was very elegant," I admitted. "She looked like a young Jackie Kennedy, don't you think?" "Who knows? Maybe one day," my sister said longingly. But her voice was shredded with doubt, as if she thought it was beyond the realms of possibility that such an impossible dream could be realized in our young lives. Such good fortune happened to other people, not to us. My father always used to say the odds of winning the lottery one day were so incredibly remote, it wasn't even worth wasting your money on such a ridiculous endeavour. I always believed he was absolutely right about this, for I had never known anyone in my young life to even win money on a scratch card, let alone hitting the jackpot. It really was like playing a game of Russian roulette, where you were guaranteed one thing, and that was not to win. I think at the time we thought living in Tribeca in one of those gorgeous apartments was wishful thinking on our parts. For me and Sammy were well used to a life where our parents' purse strings were extremely tight, and extravagances in our lives were few and far between. Don't get me wrong. My parents did their level best to give us everything we could possibly need. They'd always been extremely sacrificial like that. I often wondered how much opportunity they would have had in their lives if they had not invested all their money in raising us. But I know from my parents' perspective, they'd never have had it any other way. These days, as me and my husband Titan had been fortunate enough to move into a brownstone apartment of our own in this plush neighbourhood in Tribeca, I was now mixing in more sophisticated circles, which made me feel a little bit like a phony, as if these wealthy people would one day figure out that I didn't belong in their elite little gathering, rather like a piece of polished furniture in your home you believe is walnut, until you realise to your horror that you were duped by the salesman, and the furniture you purchased was only ever a piece of substandard, stained pine all along, and should really be tossed out, for it has no place being shown off among your valuable, most prized antiques. Certainly for me, mixing with some of New York's wealthy elite did make me feel like a fish out of water that was desperately trying to fit in, and not exactly succeeding all that well. I will say that some of the self-entitled behaviours of the super-rich I found to be exceedingly distasteful. I think the thing that horrified me about some of my newly acquired wealthy friends was how much they would waste, without giving it a second thought, as to what they were doing. If they purchased something that was now heading close to its sell-by date, for example, they would toss it in the dumpster when it was in perfectly good condition, like some smoked salmon, for example, that had not been opened yet, that someone less fortunate would have really appreciated. But the rich just didn't see it like that. One of my wealthy friends, for example, was on a diet over the Easter period. She threw out her exclusive, expensive chocolate Easter eggs, produced by one of the world's most famous chocolatiers, that her husband had purchased for her. She angrily tossed them out into the dumpster, without so much as a bye or leave, complaining bitterly to her husband that she was on a diet and he should have known better. She had no appreciation for his act of kindness, and only seemed inconvenienced by it. I remember thinking privately to myself, why couldn't you have given those exclusive chocolates to a children's home or something? I was appalled by the waste, and couldn't get my head around it, because growing up as a family, We wasted nothing, and in my opinion it was exceedingly vulgar and even criminal to throw out perfectly good things. I had grown up in a much less grandiose part of New York, in Manhattan, where my sacrificial father was determined to give us the very best that he possibly could. In doing so, he worked 3 jobs in order to give us everything we could need. Even so, we didn't enjoy the extravagant indulgences that people who have a ubiquitous amount of money clearly do. But I had never known the advantages of rich people, so I never felt deprived in any way. As my father used to say, if a frog lives in a small pond, he's extremely happy there, for he doesn't know any better. But then he becomes dissatisfied when he learns there's a bigger pond somewhere else. So suddenly the small pond seems less appealing, and then the little frog becomes less happy about his small pond. My mother had worked from home as a stay-at-home mother as we were growing up. She would make leather handbags for a living to bring in extra money. The money she made from those handbags helped to pay for some of the beach holidays we'd enjoyed as children on the Florida coast with my family, as my parents were determined to take us away on family vacations, even if it killed them financially, for they believed getting away was important. When I met Titan, who would one day become my husband, and would be the unlikely person that would change my lifestyle dramatically, with his outstanding success as an author. He had been an impoverished student, studying English at university at the time, and likewise I was also a student that was struggling, so we were pretty much in the same boat, you could say. I'm afraid to say that on the surface Titan looked like the kind of uncommitted, lackadaisical student that would never ever make it big, but that had never bothered me. I was attracted to his sharp, energetic wit and great sense of humour that would make me double over in laughter, because he was so incredibly funny. I have always thought a sense of humour and a sharp wit are the most important qualities to find in a man, for it keeps a relationship on its toes. We need to laugh in our lives, rather than take ourselves too seriously, and humour can lighten up the darkest of days. Back in those days, if Titan had told me one day he'd get rich, I would have probably laughed in his face at the absurdity of such a nonsensical idea, and would have told him he was deluding himself. Not to be mean, of course, because there are some people you could never imagine becoming wealthy, and I'm afraid to say Titan was one of those people that you assumed would perennially always be low on cash, like a struggling artist living on baked beans for the rest of their lives. I think most people who had known Titan would assume exactly the same, but the world does rather have a good sense of humour, so that some of our misleading preconceived ideas about people can turn to dust, crumbling in our hands like a very dry cookie. There are people out there that end up surprising us, as their capabilities suddenly make our eyes pop, like the unlikely kid in the back of the classroom that failed his grades, never paid attention, and later in life becomes a tech billionaire, selling his first company by the age of 23. Titan was one of those people who, despite my faith in his accomplishments as a writer, had surprised even me. And one day we had bumped into Titan's old English teacher, who'd thrown her arms around Titan when he'd become a successful author, and said, "You were the last student of mine who I ever expected to become a rising star. You showed no interest in any of your classes, and now look at where you are today. Life really is extraordinary." Back in the early days when I was dating Titan, I instinctively knew that if I ever got serious about him, and if we were to marry one day, that we would probably spend the rest of our lives like a couple of struggling artists in the Big Apple, living somewhere in Manhattan, where we would lightly grapple to pay our rent on time, to a difficult, truculent landlord who had no mercy on people with thin wallets. As far as I was concerned, as long as Titan and I had each other, that was all that actually mattered. Titan had never been remotely interested in money, nor was he materialistically inclined, or interested in rich people's toys. He loved pursuing his passions, of which writing had become the central focus of his life. I was wistfully naive back in those days, not realizing how financial insecurities can invariably leave huge dents in relationships that are sometimes impossible to repair. I was too much of a hopeless romantic to give such considerations any credence. By all accounts, Titan had swept me off my feet, and quite frankly I couldn't imagine spending my life with anyone else, even if it meant being poor. I didn't care about such things. Titan had wild, tousled, dark, shoulder-length hair, brown eyes and a long beard. Some people described him as looking uncannily like a Jesus character in a movie they'd seen. I do vividly recall on one occasion a young boy ran up to Titan when we were in the supermarket doing a brief shop together. He ran towards us like a swift breeze, nearly tripping over our trolley in his eagerness to get to us. The boy stared at Titan with wide eyes and said, "It's really you! Please will you heal my mother? My mummy's not well, but you can heal her." Titan had looked at this kid blankly, not knowing what this young boy could possibly mean. So he said, "I'm sorry, young man. I'd love to help your mother, but I'm afraid I'm not a doctor." The boy looked somewhat puzzled and said, "But you're Jesus, aren't you? Jesus can heal anyone he likes. He can even wake up a dead person, you know. Jesus woke up Lazarus when he'd been dead for a few days. If you can wake up a dead person, Jesus, then you can make my mummy well again. She never gets out of bed. She's tired all the time. I want her to take me to the park. But you can make her better. I know you can." At this time the young boy's aunt had approached us. She was out of breath, looked rather frazzled, almost as if she'd had an electric shock. The little boy who'd approached us was her nephew, and had spontaneously charged down the aisles of the supermarket the moment he'd spotted Titan. The young boy's aunt's face flushed red. She was clearly extremely embarrassed by her nephew's behaviour. She scolded her nephew, looking less than amused. "Jamie, what on earth are you doing?" she cried out indignantly. "Why did you run off like that? I told you not to leave my side. Why are you annoying these very nice people who are trying to shop?" The boy looked at his aunt and said, "I'm just asking Jesus over here to heal Mummy, because Jesus just has to tell me that she's better, and then she'll be well again." "Jamie," said the aunt, "this young man over here," she said, pointing to Titan, "is not Jesus." "But he is Jesus," the boy insisted. "I saw him on the movie we watched together. He can heal Mummy, so she can take me to the park and push me on the swings." "I am so sorry about the chaos my nephew has caused," said the woman. "He's a little boy that can get easily confused about things. You must forgive him. We were watching a Jesus movie together recently, and you look uncannily like the character playing the part of Jesus in the movie. You're a doppelganger for him, actually," she said to Titan. "I guess when my nephew saw you, he thought you were Jesus. I wondered why he shot off like a rocket like that." "It's an easy enough mistake to make," Titan had said kindly, seeing the humour in the situation, as he always did. "I wish I was Jesus. I'd like very much to heal your mother, Jamie, so that she can push you on the swing at the park. I'm sorry that I can't do that for you, but I will definitely pray for your mother, and they do say that God hears our prayers, so you never know. Your mother might get better soon." "But I pray all the time. My mummy is still sick," said Jamie, looking so desolate that it almost broke my heart. I was beginning to wish I could wave a magic wand, or rub an Aladdin's lamp, and miraculously heal the boy's mother. "What is wrong with Jamie's mother?" Titan asked, directing his question towards Jamie's aunt, wondering perhaps if he should not have pried, as maybe this woman didn't want to disclose what was wrong with her sister. But I think in some way she felt she owed us an explanation, due to her nephew's unorthodox behaviour, so she didn't hesitate to open up to us about her sister's ailing condition. "Well, it's all very sad," said Jamie's aunt. "My sister, you know, has always been the life and soul of the party. She's had so much energy all her life, but one day she couldn't get out of bed. It was absolutely terrifying for the family. We feared the very worst, as you do. We thought she had cancer or something dreadful like that. It turns out my sister's got a mysterious illness that the doctors cannot diagnose. She has no energy to do anything at all. She stays in bed all day long. They've done numerous tests on her, of course, but they can't find any rational explanation as to why she's like this. That can't be easy on the family, said Titan. Well, at the very least, she doesn't have cancer, which is a relief for us all. But her being fatigued and exhausted all the time, well, it's been tough on us all, most especially Jamie. One time they thought my sister had Lyme's disease, or some ongoing viral infection that was draining the life out of her. But that is not the case. It's distressing for Jamie seeing his mother like this, because she can't be involved in his life actively. But as I don't have any children myself, I've agreed to take charge over him. Of course, I take him to the park as often as I can and push him on the swings. But sadly, I am no replacement for his mother. It's not easy for any of you, going through something like this, said Titan, looking genuinely sad for Jamie. That must be tough on Jamie over here, to see his mother in such a bad way. I've heard of an illness where people are too exhausted to get out of bed before, but I've forgotten the name of the condition. But from what I gathered, it's not that uncommon. The good news is there is no reason why your sister might not get better one day. Titan had got onto his knees so that his eyes could look directly into Jamie's. He hugged little Jamie and said that he would pray for his mother to get better. And he explained that although he wasn't Jesus, maybe Jesus would hear his prayers. Jamie looked rather put out. But I thought you were Jesus, he insisted. I saw you on that movie, and you made all those people better. You cured them. Why can't you make my mummy better? He almost wailed, for the bitter disappointment in his voice was so palpable it made me want to cry. Jamie's aunt became rather frustrated with her nephew, grabbing him by the hand to guide him away from us. My heart broke to see his little face that looked so crushed, because Titan wasn't Jesus. Did you not hear a word I said? This nice man over here, Jamie, is not Jesus, she scolded. Nor was that man, as it happens, who was playing the part of Jesus in the movie we watched. He wasn't the real Jesus either. The real Jesus, Jamie, is up in heaven. I'm sure you can pray to him to heal your mother. But you can't just approach random strangers like this, just because you think they look like Jesus. I'm glad to say we ran into Jamie's aunt 12 months later, in the very same supermarket. But Jamie wasn't with her this time, and she told us the good news, and that was her sister's illness had miraculously been healed. So maybe her nephew's faith had indirectly brought about some kind of spontaneous healing. Who knows? Apparently the first thing Jamie's mother had done when she felt better was to take Jamie off for ice cream and to the park where she could push him on the swing, and the little boy had been so delighted. His aunt told us that one day her sister miraculously woke up with so much unexplainable energy and was back to being a personal trainer in no time at all, advising people how to get fit. I guess you could say stranger things have happened, but there was no doubt in my mind that that little boy we encountered in the supermarket had oodles of faith, and in some way I believe he was responsible for his mother's healing. I had been attracted to Titan from the moment I first met him, not only because he was a humorous character, but because I knew I could trust him, and loyalty matters a whole lot to me, because I don't want to be in a relationship where I have to doubt my husband's fidelity. Sadly, my parents advised me against getting involved with Titan, despite his loyalty and his great sense of humour. It would seem every well-meaning parent wants the best for their children, and tries to look out for them. They want their children to have better lives than they did. I think much as my parents genuinely liked Titan, who they thought was a natural comedian, as he made them laugh all the time. Sadly, though, that wasn't enough for them to believe that he was actually marriage material. Regretfully, they did not see him as becoming a good provider for me. I guess my mother just didn't want me to struggle like she and my father had done over the years. So in her own warped kind of way, she was probably looking out for me, if you can call it that. My mother became unduly worried when she realized my relationship with Titan was becoming extremely serious, and that Titan could potentially one day become her son-in-law. She could tell that I was besotted over the man, as he was over me. And such an unsettling revelation did not appear to rest very easy with her. One day after Titan had joined our family for dinner, which included my younger sister Sammy, my father Lewis, and my mother Amanda, he had said something really casually over the dinner table that ruffled my mother's feathers so much that it took her a long time to calm down after that. "One day, when Shelley and I get married, I hope, Mrs. Lamb, that my children look exactly like you and Shelley, as you're both extremely pretty, if you don't mind my saying so. And I would certainly like our little girl to have Shelley's eyes." Let's just say my mother, when she heard that, looked as shaken up as a baby's rattle. She knew then just how serious Titan was over me, especially as he was spilling out the marriage word. Titan had once told me when he first laid eyes on me at the university cafeteria, where I'd been loading my plate with a very unhealthy-looking pizza slice, that he knew I was the girl for him. It was so typical for him to fall for a lady picking out something extremely unhealthy to eat. I certainly don't think if I'd been loading my plate with salad, he'd have been quite as enamoured over me. He said he had been drawn to my innocent brown eyes and my dark hair with its auburn highlights. And it is true. I am a younger-looking version of my mother. I've certainly seen photographs of her at my current age, and we do look exactly alike, whereas my sister Sammy looks just like my father. I remember my mother, who was seated at the head of the table, had been about to tuck into her apple pie, and had exchanged a rather worried look with my father, after Titan's rather rash comment about us one day getting married. She suddenly lost extreme interest in her apple pie, pushing it away from her, like a dieter who knows they cannot afford to consume the extra calories. But never once has my mother ever said no to apple pie in her entire life, not even when she's been on a strict diet, and so Titan's off-the-cuff remarks had clearly caused her undue upset. "What was that you were saying there, Titan?" my mother asked gingerly, as if hoping she had misheard him. My sister Sammy pulled a face at the dinner table. She was always inclined to be a tad sarcastic. "You're so deaf, Mum! Or are you dumb? Maybe you're both," she chuckled. I always admired my sister's rudeness to my parents, for I would never have had the plucky courage to speak to them like she did. She didn't hesitate to tell my mother if she thought she'd put on weight, or if a dress she was wearing for a special event made her look like mutton dressed up as lamb. My sister had absolutely no filter, and I loved that about her. Her candour was so refreshing. If I wanted an honest opinion about anything, even if I didn't like the answer, Sammy would say it as it was, without sugarcoating anything, just to avoid hurting my feelings. "Didn't you hear what Titan just said, Mum? Or have you just got cauliflower growing between your ears? You just didn't like what Titan said. That's why you pretended not to hear him. We're not stupid, Mum. We know what's going on here." "I don't know what on earth you're talking about, Sammy," my mother said, flushing red. "I didn't hear what Titan was saying over there." "Well, I'll help you remember what Titan was saying," said Sammy with a triumphant smirk. "Titan was saying, Mum, that one day when he and Shelley get married, he hopes their children look like Shelley, or even like you. Now that's a compliment, don't you think, Mum?" "Well, it certainly is a very gracious compliment. Shelley is a very pretty girl, but so are you, Sammy," my mother said, awkwardly glancing towards Titan. "It stands to reason that a young man would want his children to look like two very attractive young ladies, don't you think?" Sammy pulled a face. She was not the kind of girl that received compliments graciously. "Mum, you don't have to say that to make me feel better about myself. We all know that Shelley is the looker in this family, and it sure is not me. She takes after you in that regard. I wasn't so lucky, was I? I look more like a bulldog. I've got Dad's very big face and his flat pug-like nose. I'm not stupid, Mum. I could see my reflection in the mirror, and at school people called me Bulldog, and they did it for good reason, didn't they? But I know they were just teasing me, so I've never taken it to heart." "How absolutely awful," said my mother. "Some children can be so cruel, can't they?" It was at that point my father had looked up at my sister with a humorous glint in his eyes. He waved a finger at her and said mischievously, "I'll have you know, Sammy, that bulldogs are exceptionally good-looking dogs, even if I say so myself. So if the children at school were teasing you about your nose when you were growing up, they were as jealous as hell. That's what I say. Bulldogs have some fine-looking qualities, noble qualities, and they're very robust dogs with a great sense of humour. Bulldogs, pugs, and Pekingeses are the natural comedians of this world. Don't be so quick to ridicule them, just because of their flat snouts. Besides anything else, beauty is most certainly in the eye of the beholder, do you not think? If that were not the case, your mother over here would never have fallen in love with the likes of me, along with my flat nose, nor would she have even married me." "Sorry, Dad, but I'd rather look like Shelley than have my flat snout that I inherited from you," Sammy said candidly. My sister absolutely loathed her nose, but not enough to have surgery on it. My sister Sammy thought it wasn't worth going under the knife for anything, unless, of course, you didn't have a choice in the matter. She would often tell us, "My friend's father is an anaesthetist. He says it's dangerous being put under, and women who do it for facelifts and stuff like that are taking unnecessary risks with their health." "Honestly, Sammy, listen to yourself. You're tearing yourself apart with your words," my mother interjected rather defensively, for she didn't like Sammy talking so disparagingly about herself. My sister did have a flat nose, though, but it did make her look adorable. "I don't know where you get this absurd idea from, Sammy. Both you girls are very striking and beautiful in very different ways. As your father was rightly saying, a flat nose can be an endearing quality. And so what if you have a flatter nose than most people? It's charming, I'm most sure. Why do you think bulldogs and pugs are such popular, highly sought-after dog breeds? Because people cannot resist their flat snouts. That's why." Sammy pulled a face. "Mum, stop while you're ahead, won't you? Please don't spout all this dribble at me. You sound stupid. I've got a flat nose, and so don't tell me otherwise. Yes, I agree, flat noses look cute on pugs and bulldogs, but I'm human, aren't I? And I don't think they're so cute on humans. I'm sorry, but they're not." Titan, being the gentleman that he was, had said, "You're a very good-looking family, Mrs. Lamb. Your whole family is. Flat noses and all," he said, giving my sister a cheeky wink. My mother dabbed her white serviette over her mouth, then placed it on the table beside her untouched bowl of apple pie. She rose quickly to her feet, almost pushing the chair over in her haste to get away from the table. She had found the conversation we were having extremely unpalatable. She hastily began to clear away the dessert plates, asking me if I'd give her a hand, and telling everybody else to go to the living room to relax. "Shelley, dear, I need some help with the dishes." "Can I do something to help, Mrs. Lamb?" asked Titan, who was eager to lend a helping hand. He was a gentleman like that. "Oh, absolutely not, Titan. I wouldn't dream of it. You're a guest in our home." "You never know, Mrs. Lamb. I might become family any time soon," Titan teased. My mother pretended not to hear him, but looked unduly flustered. Her lip was hanging down in a disapproving frown, and her face was so pale that for a moment I thought she could potentially pass out. "No, no, you stay just where you are, Titan. Go to the living room with the others," she said, holding up her hand in the stop position, rather like a lollipop lady at a pedestrian crossing. "I want you all to go and relax. Shelley will help me clear all this up, won't you, dear?" my mother said, grabbing me almost violently by the arm and practically pulling me into the kitchen. Of course I knew what my mother wanted and why she'd ushered me into the kitchen, to help her with the dishes. She had been alarmed by Titan's remarks and needed a word with me. I could read my mother like a book. She could be so predictable. The fact that Titan had dared to mention the marriage word in our house had sent her into a panicked frenzy. She began to wash the dishes in the kitchen sink, handing them over to me to dry. I waited for her to say something, as I had anticipated what was coming next, and it certainly seemed my preconceived deductions were not remotely wrong. My mother could be as translucent as a glass pane. My father and sister Sammy probably guessed exactly why my mother had dragged me away into the kitchen impromptu like this, because she wanted to have that talk that parents try to avoid having with their children. She looked up at me rather nervously, while rattling the dishes under the warm soapy suds of the water. She was wearing a pair of bright yellow rubber gloves, as she tried to protect her hands from the hard water. "I called you into the kitchen, dear, to help me with the dishes, because I need to talk to you about something rather sensitive," she said as tactfully and as diplomatically as she possibly could. "It's about Titan." She avoided my gaze for a second, as though she was extremely uncomfortable about this conversation. "You heard what he said in the dining room, did you not? We were about to tuck into our apple pie at the time. He said that when you both got married, he wanted his children to look like you or me, and for your little girl to have your beautiful eyes. That is so dreadfully presumptuous, don't you think?" said my mother, spitting out the words as if they were venom on her tongue. "I mean, that young man has the blatant audacity to think the two of you are going to get married any time soon. And yet he barely hasn't got enough money to scrape together to pay his own rent. So how in the world would he ever be able to take care of you, Sammy, and support you financially, let alone bring children into this world? He doesn't have a brass farthing to rub together, does he? You're both so dreadfully young still, with your whole lives ahead of you. There is really no need to be in such a dreadful rush to settle down. The way Titan was talking in there has left me feeling unduly disquieted." "Mum, quit being so dramatic. You're overreacting. Titan was just giving us both a compliment." "A compliment? Is that what you call it? I'm afraid I see things very differently to you. And I take what he says a lot more seriously, not with just a pinch of salt like you so obviously do. I know a lot of youngsters these days wisely wait to get married when they're older. They don't consider making a serious commitment a wise thing to do when they're struggling to pay their own rent. I think it is irresponsible of Titan to be talking like this at this stage of his early life, when he's receiving handouts from his own parents. And he's got a huge student loan that he has to pay off, which probably cost as much money as buying a house. The last thing a man like him should be doing is mentioning the marriage word, let alone talking about bringing children into this world, when he can't even afford to pay his own bills. The very idea is completely ludicrous." "What is wrong with Titan talking about getting married one day, Mum? Why are you so against the idea? If we love each other, it's the most natural thing for us to do, don't you think? Even if he doesn't have money, with my job as an occupational therapist, I'll be able to pay for the both of us if need be. You said you loved Titan's sense of humour. So what is it you do have against him, then?" My mother raised a hand to stop my outburst. "And I do like your Titan very much. He's got a great sense of humour. I'm the first to admit that. He's a delightful young man in many, many ways. And your father and I genuinely enjoy his company because he's a natural comedian. But I'm sorry, Sammy,
Those are not the credentials that you look for in a future son-in-law, or in your case, a long-term partner. I'm sorry, Sammy, all this nonsensical talk about wanting kids to look like you is going a step too far as I'm concerned. You haven't been going out with Titan for all that long anyway. But it looks like he's already assuming the two of you are going to get married. I find his presumptions very alarming and exceedingly distasteful. The man has absolutely no prospects, and has about as much ambition as a hermit crab. And hermit crabs, let me tell you, are notorious for taking over other creatures' shells. Why do they do it? It's because they're too damned lazy and irresponsible to make their own accommodation arrangements. Titan is just like that in every way, happy to sleep on other people's sofas for the rest of his life, accept handouts from his parents, and refuse to take responsibility for anything. That's him in a nutshell, if you ask me.
But, Mum, what have you got against him? I don't get it. I looked at my mother in bemusement, for it had never occurred to me that my mother didn't like the idea of Titan and I one day tying the knot. It was vindictively cruel and ungraciously unkind of her to describe Titan's carefree manner as lacking in ambition.
I knew that this is exactly what you would say and how you would react if I was to broach the subject with you,
my mother said, almost breaking a dish under the water to express her indignance.
It makes me mad as hell to hear you talk like this, Shelley. Listen to yourself, will you? You sound like a broken record. Oh, it doesn't matter if Titan isn't ambitious. I'll take care of things with the money that I make as an occupational therapist. Don't you see what's going on here, Sammy? You're making allowances for Titan to become a kept man. You're encouraging it. I'm quite sure that Titan will be more than happy to take advantage of your kindness, exploit your generosity, and do absolutely nothing to help you pay your bills. Things will be so tight you won't be able to afford to have children of your own. You're so caught up in your infatuation for that man that you've lost all common sense, Shelley. Look at your sister Sammy, for example. She's going out with a boy who has real prospects. But you're choosing a loose cannon, whose only interest is taking advantage of you. I just can't sit back and watch your life implode like this without saying something. I'm sorry, I can't, Shelley.
Mum, please will you calm down? You're literally breaking those dishes. Watch what you're doing, or we won't have any dishes left at this rate.
I don't care about the dishes, Shelley. It's you I care about,
said my mother, rattling the dishes under the sink, so angrily that they almost broke under the water. I'm sure she was wishing I'd never met Titan. I wasn't enjoying hearing how little she really thought of him. How dare she suggest he had no prospects? Hearing her speak about Titan with so much condemnation made me silently seethe.
Sweetheart, don't look so dismayed. I'm telling you this for your own good. You're getting far too serious over Titan.
My mother had no idea how much she'd riled me up. At this point, I quite literally wanted to box her ears, but I bit my lip until I could taste the metallic taste of my own blood on my tongue. Biting my lip was the one way I could contain my outrage. My mother rambled on garrulously, as if she was a freight train, determined to destroy and crush any faith I had in Titan. But then again, her opinion didn't matter, did it? It was what I believed that counted, I reminded myself.
Long term, I'm not certain that Titan is the right man for you, she said candidly. One day you're going to settle down with a man, Shelley. You need to be able to live in a safe, financially secure environment, where you and my grandchildren can thrive and prosper. I don't want you living hand to mouth. I couldn't bear that. Life is tough enough as it is, and the last thing I need is to know that you're worrying about money all the time, or standing in line outside food banks. Imagine if that were to happen to you.
I rolled my eyes on this. My mother was being way too dramatic. I was a qualified occupational therapist, for goodness sake. I could at least earn a decent income. So the way my mother was harping on about Titan, anyone would think she believed I'd become homeless one day. She was being absolutely ridiculous.
Me and your father, Sammy, we've battled many times financially. It hasn't been easy for us. You know your father's worked 3 jobs to support you and Sammy. It took a great toll on our relationship, let me tell you, worrying about how we were going to pay our bills on time. And many times we got ourselves into serious debt. I don't want any of my children embracing similar struggles. I'm trying to offer you some practical advice to steer you in the right direction as far as your future is concerned, Shelley. I'm going to be brutally honest with you for your own good. I don't think Titan is cut out to be a provider, that's all. I'm sorry. I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm telling you as it is.
What's that supposed to mean, Mum? Titan's clever. He's got an English degree. He wants to become a writer one of these days. You're talking about him as if he's a loser, when nothing could be further from the truth. One day he's going to write a bestseller. And if he does, money shouldn't be a problem for us, should it? My mother let out an exasperated sigh, which in not so many words was implying that I was whimsically naive and exceedingly foolish. It was like she thought I had the brain cell of a plant. She dried her hands on a dishcloth, threw her rubber glove on the rack, and pulled a wisper of dark hair away from her face, while pinning her eyes directly on me.
The fact that Titan wants to become an author one day, love, speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned. It's like the man has got his head in the clouds. Artists are like that, you know, so very idealistic. Big dreamers they are. The truth is that not many writers get to make it big. Very few become bestsellers. It's fanciful thinking on their parts, believing that they can become like the next J.K. Rowling. Yes, granted she got lucky. But unfortunately, becoming a writer is like playing the lottery. There aren't many winners. It's the way it is, I'm afraid. It's not a reliable profession by any manner of means. It's a highly competitive business, and not many people make it big. You can dream, of course you can. But it doesn't mean your dreams will be fruitful or amount to anything. What I'm trying to say, Shelley, is that you may find yourself supporting Titan for years and years to come. You'll begin to resent him for it, let me tell you. Once he does send his books to the publishers, they may be rejected. So you'll have to go back to the drawing board and try again, hoping to get that lucky break which may never ever come. You need to prepare yourself for a whole lot of disappointment if you end up with him.
Mum, you're being utterly ridiculous, I scoffed. Titan's got big dreams, of course he has, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it doesn't mean they won't be realised one day. You really do know how to throw a spanner in the works, don't you?
I know one thing, Shelley, and that is life is not so easy. It's not a bowl of cherries, you know. Of course you don't realise that at your young callow age. But one of these days, I hate to tell you this, dear, but you're going to have a rude awakening, and it's not going to be pretty.
Why are you being like this, Mum? So mean, so spiteful, I cried out indignantly, throwing my dishcloth at her. It seems I've got more faith in Titan's writing ability than you have. Why do you judge him like this, when you know nothing about his capabilities as a writer? Everything you say is based on your biased, preconceived presumptions, which quite frankly stink. It's like someone saying that Picasso can't paint without ever seeing his work. How can you possibly pass any credible criticism on someone's work when you know nothing about it at all? I'll have you know, Mum, at university Titan's English professor described him as a rising talent. But then again, you wouldn't be interested in that, would you? You've already made your mind up about him.
I've made my mind up about him, that's true enough, my mother admitted. I know enough about him to have summed him up. He's lazy, isn't he? He's clandestine. He decided to leech on you for the rest of his life. I know his type. You cannot see what me and your father can so clearly see, because we know about people like Titan. And we also know that you're very vulnerable, easily deceived, and that love like yours can be extremely misguided. You've got to accept a large dose of reality, Shelley. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, I'm afraid to say. And becoming a writer is a rocky, tumultuous road that never, ever runs smooth. I just don't want you embroiled in that kind of unpredictable lifestyle, where you can't afford to buy anything nice for yourself.
Ma'am, there is so much more to life than having nice things, I'll have you know. Why are you being so materialistic all of a sudden? You've always taught me to think outside the box. But now you're suggesting I'm going to be utterly miserable if I don't marry someone that is rich. Do you realise how shallow you're being? Basing everything on monetary value?
Look, love, I know you love Titan. I don't dispute that for a second, but do you want to struggle every day of your life? So many artists live hand to mouth. It's a pity that sometimes being creative doesn't always pay as well as it should. Look at all those young, wistful people trotting off to LA in the hope that they may become rich and famous actors or actresses one day. But few of them do, you know. It's only a few people that get that lucky break. And sometimes it's the connections and who you know that gives you the step up in the right direction, which isn't at all fair. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. I wonder, for example, if Goldie Hawn gave her kids the lucky breaks they needed in Hollywood. Would Kate Hudson, for example, have got so far without her mother's indomitable influences? I don't think so, somehow. Ask yourself those harder questions. I'm afraid I don't think that Titan's got very much going for him, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you.
Don't worry, Mum, I said sarcastically. Your honesty has not been anything else but brutal. So you're saying you don't think Titan will get a lucky break? Is that it? I said indignantly, glaring at my mother furiously, for I didn't like the way she spoke about Titan. I thought her curt remarks were rude and unfounded, and had no substance on reality. Why was she so sure that Titan could never make it big one day? She knew nothing about his abilities as a writer. She just jumped onto her own fanciful bandwagon and believed he was a layabout that was going to sponge off me for the rest of his life, mooch on me all the time. I didn't have the heart to even share with Titan what my mother really thought about him. I knew it would break him. Titan adored my mother, and if he thought for a single second that she thought he was using me, it would really have offended him. So I decided there were some things I would not share with him.
"Sweetheart,"
said my mother, putting a hand on my chin and lifting it up to meet her tender gaze.
"It's not for me or your father to tell you what to do. This is your life. You're the one that needs to steer the rudder in the right direction to make a clear path for yourself. My hope is that you're not going to find yourself on tempestuous waters with tsunami waves threatening to capsize the boat of your life. I'm just a lot older and wiser than you are, with a great deal of life experience behind me. And it would be wise for you to take what I have to say to account."
You think I'm going to be poor, do you, if I settle down with Titan? Is that what you're saying? You really think I'm going to live an impoverished life? That's rich, Mum. You have no faith in my abilities to succeed, or in the person I have chosen to believe in. Thanks a lot for that, Mum.
Don't be like that, Shelley.
Don't be like what, Mum? How'd you like it if your mother pulled you to one side and told you not to marry Dad because you'd have a tough life? How would you have liked that, then?
Well, if you want to know the truth, said my mother sincerely, I would have appreciated my mother's honesty. It would have been terribly nice if she told me what she thought of your father, or if indeed she had any misgivings about him. I would have certainly listened to her sagacious advice. I love your father. Don't get me wrong about that. But life hasn't been easy for the both of us on the financial front, let me tell you. And I would have appreciated my mother's warnings on this stuff. When I got married to your father, my mother was absolutely thrilled. But it wouldn't have mattered who I'd married. I could have married the dustman down the road, and she wouldn't have cared. She'd have reacted exactly the same way.
Good on her, Mum, for not imposing her will on her own daughter, but allowing you to make your own life choices, thank you very much. Besides anything else, Mum, you and Dad have a great life. Whether your Mum approved of Dad or not, You said so as much. Why shouldn't it be the same for me and Titan, then?
Don't be so reactive, Shelley. You're getting quite annoyed, I can see that. I honestly don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you the future, can I? But I will say this for you, that life is a lot different nowadays than it was when I was a girl. For many people can't afford to buy properties these days. Many young people are forced to remain living with their parents. I just can't help worrying about my future grandchildren, that's all. Haven't I got a right to do that?
But, Mum, don't you get it? I love Titan. Doesn't that count for anything in your eyes? Dad was a struggling student when you married him, and you didn't care a jot about that, did you? You were always broke back then. Titan and I may be broke, but we're good for each other. I can't imagine myself with anyone else. Why do you paint him in such a negative, demeaning light? You're being grossly unfair. I think Titan's got what it takes to make it big one day. I really do. And even if he doesn't, it's not the end of the world. Because I can't help the way I feel about him. It would be nice to have your support, rather than your relentless criticism.
Sweetheart, I know I have been very unfair talking to you about all of this. Perhaps I shouldn't have expressed my feelings because you're not taking it very well. The truth is I'm sticking my neck out for you, telling you how I feel. Only because I care. I want the best for you, as every parent does for their child. I hope you appreciate that.
So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.